Good day or night, wherever you are, this is Miss Andrea with the Paris Library. Today, we will be doing a spoiler-free review for the adult romance, The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. I will talk about the book while creating a themed collage for the series in my personal bullet journal. Hopefully this is more entertaining than just listening to me talk. To save time, I will read the Goodreads synopsis for the first book in the Wild series before going into the review. Calla Fletcher wasn't even 2 when her mother took her and fled the Alaskan wild, unable to handle the isolation of the extreme rural lifestyle, leaving behind Calla's father, Ren Fletcher, in the process. Calla never looked back, and at 26, a busy life in Toronto is all she knows. But when Calla learns that Ren's days may be numbered, she knows that it's time to make the long trip back to the remote frontier town where she was born. She braves the roaming wild life, the odd daylight hours, the exorbitant prices, and even the occasional, dear God, outhouse, all for the chance to connect with her father, a man who, despite his faults, she can't help but care for. While she struggles to adjust to this rugged environment, Jonah, the unkept, obnoxious, and proud Alaskan pilot who keeps her father's charter plane company operational, can't imagine calling anywhere else home, and he's clearly waiting with one hand on the throttle to fly this city girl back to where she belongs, convinced that she's too pampered to handle the wild. And that concludes the Goodreads synopsis for the first book in this series. Please read the content and trigger warnings in the description of this video and in other reviews before you read this series if you are sensitive to a specific type of content, or just to know what to expect. There will also be a link to Common Sense Media for parents and guardians to utilize when making the decision about this book for younger readers. Also, whenever I am saying my personal opinion about the book, the screen will do this, so that you know it's my opinion and not part of the recommendation. Everyone has differing opinions on books, so keep that in mind and make decisions about your own enjoyment for yourself. I hope you come out of this video knowing if you want to read this book or not, and feel free to let us know your thoughts in the comments. Now, onto the breakdown. Let's get into some of the specific aspects of this series broken down into character, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, logic, and personal enjoyment. We'll start with characters. The reader grows with this cast of realistic and flawed characters throughout this novel. The main character is an egocentric city girl with little compassion or empathy for others at the beginning of the book, but her character does have some growth by the end. Although Calla is realistically flawed and not as likable as most main characters, she's still enjoyable to follow on this journey. Even if most people would hate Calla as a person in real life, she is well developed as a character, and the reader still roots for her and understands her in the end. It is reasonable to assume that not all people will find her narcissistic tendencies tolerable in this story, because her character will be enjoyed or not based on individual preference. Jonah is flawed, yet a good person. He is a more likable character than Calla, and his journey in this story is a joy to follow. Additionally, every side character in this book feels real, with their own stories, feelings, personalities, and flaws. Every character has a history and motive that corresponds to their actions, relationships, and personalities. Lastly, the reader is not only led to be highly invested in the characters, but also their changing relationships. Each character has their own feelings and motives that keeps the reader guessing as to who will say or do what next. Not to mention, this is an enemies to lovers plot that develops in a tasteful and suspenseful way. It is hard not to root for the main characters to put their differences and biases aside in order to be happy together. And said romance is worth the time it takes to develop. The romance is spicy, realistic, and satisfying. My favorite character is Jonah because his motivations and actions made the most sense to me, and his personality is much more likable than Calla's. Up next, we have atmosphere. Having the Alaskan wild as a backdrop to a tense, steamy romance with strong family themes and love is nothing less than satisfying. Any reader who enjoys woodsy or naturey scenery with cozy cabins in small towns of unique people and unique situations will enjoy this book's atmosphere. Additionally, the fact that a majority of the story takes place near or in plains also adds an adventurous flair with high stakes and danger. In terms of tone, this book has some heavy topics surrounding Calla's divorced parents, her father's cancer, and everyone seems to have lost someone in this story. There are a lot of heavy scenes depicting mourning, reconnection, and difficult conversations that come with real life, because life is complicated. People are complicated. Now let's talk about the way this book is written. Tucker's writing is accessible, enjoyable, and filled with banter. Reading this story is a joy because the plot and relationship is well paced, the world is well written with deep histories, and the characters are realistically flawed. This book is hard to put down, and the writing makes it feel as though the reader hasn't been just reading for 3 hours. It is easy to get lost in Tucker's leisurely writing style. The scenes play out almost like a movie, and the banter keeps the reader smirking despite the heavy topics. Alongside writing, we have plot. Although the story is quite predictable, it is an enjoyable one. There is something comforting about knowing where a story is going and having that itch scratched at just the right moments. The pacing is perfected in such a way that the relationships and character development feel real and satisfying to the reader. Tucker takes the time to build a memorable foundation in order to prepare the reader for the larger plot points and character developments. This gives the last half of the book an emotional weight that may not have been the case otherwise. Now, let's talk about how intriguing this book is. It is easy to feel invested in the characters of this story since their relationships and personalities are just as complex as real-life people. As Calla finds family in her new friends, the reader finds friends in the characters and ends up rooting for them as if they are real people. Once invested in the characters, their relationships, and the story, this book flies by. Even if the reader knows where the story is going, it is still exciting to see how the characters get there and follow them on this heartwarming and heartbreaking journey. Second to last, we have the logic of this book. The portrayal of mourning and loss in this book are realistic enough to make the reader feel seen and heartbroken all at the same time. Those who have lost somebody they love or had to deal with divorce will connect with the more emotional scenes in this book. On the other hand, the main character Calla can be a bit hard to relate to at times if the reader isn't a younger person who hasn't fully adjusted to adulthood or figured out what compassion is. Calla is very self-centered in the entire novel. She does have some character growth by the end, even once she begins to care about other people's feelings, her anger and comfort seems to always be her first reaction to everything. It would be expected that a 26-year-old woman could think about others and learn to control her emotions, especially with a psychiatrist for a stepfather, but Calla's emotional intelligence is more along the lines of a teenager, and she is very much controlled by her egocentric emotions. This can make it a bit difficult to feel sympathy for her, but that will be based upon personal preference for the reader. There are also some quite whimsical and convenient events in this story, but never absurd. This book does not require too much suspension of disbelief, and where it does, it is usually comical or satisfying to the relationship. There really aren't any points that make the reader question the possibility of the situations the characters are in, and their actions and decisions reflect that of what we assume a real person would do. I personally didn't like Calla, but didn't find her to be intolerable. I still think she is a well-developed character with a realistic personality. I just wish she had a bit more character growth by the end of the story. Lastly, let's talk about personal enjoyment. Anyone who enjoys a satisfying romance that covers some heavier real-life topics with realistic characters and strong family themes will enjoy this book. With a lot of cozy scenes. Not only is the story scenic and steamy, but it's also wholesome and heartbreaking. Lastly, it is very well written and enjoyable to read. There is an abundance of banter, several steamy scenes, and a lot of emotion in this book. This is the perfect read for fall and winter because it takes place in rainy and snowy Alaska. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, please check this book out. And that concludes our recommendation/review of the first book in the Wild series called The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. This is the final journal spread based on the aesthetics of the book. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment. It can be as simple as a single emoji, and like this video. Please consider subscribing to our channel if you want more aesthetic journaling book reviews. This was Miss Andrea with the Paris Library. I hope you have a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you again next time. Bye bye!